The 9,119th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in Mali. The agenda is adopted. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. Members of the Council have before them document S/2022/650, the text of a draft resolution submitted by France and Mexico. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2022/595, a letter dated 3rd August 2022 from the panel of experts on Mali established pursuant to Resolution 2374 of 2017 addressed to the President of the Security Council. The Council is ready to proceed to the vote on the draft resolution before it. I shall now put the draft resolution to the vote. Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2022/650 please raise their hand? The result of the voting is as follows. The draft resolution received 15 votes in favor. The draft resolution has been adopted unanimously as Resolution 2649 of 2022. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned. The 9,120th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in Libya. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of Libya to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2022/632, the report of the Secretary General on the United Nations support mission in Libya. At this meeting, the Security Council will hear briefings by Ms. DiCarlo and Ms. Ruchira Kamboj, Permanent Representative of India, in her capacity as Chair of the Security Council Committee established pursuant to Resolution 1970 of 2011 concerning Libya. I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo.
Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity to brief the Security Council on the main developments in Libya over the past month. Since the last Security Council meeting on Libya on 25 July, the United Nations has continued to engage with Libyan actors at all levels to facilitate a resolution of the political impasse. I am deeply concerned that the ongoing stalemate and continued delays in implementing the electoral process pose a growing threat to security in and around Tripoli and potentially to all Libyans. That threat materialized a few days ago when Tripoli was again the theater of violent clashes between armed groups supporting Mr. Dbeibeh and Mr. Bashaga, respectively. The fighting broke out in the early hours of 27 August and rapidly intensified and spread to civilian-populated areas of Tripoli. It involved the indiscriminate use of medium and heavy weapons, affecting civilians and civilian infrastructure. According to the Libyan authorities, at least 42 people were killed, including 4 civilians and 159 injured in the clashes. 50 families were reported displaced, and 5 health facilities were significantly damaged. 2 detention centers for migrants and refugees were affected, involving a total of 560 persons. This appeared to be an attempt of pro-Bashaga forces to enter the capital from the east. However, they were blocked by pro-Dbeibeh forces at Zlatan, about 160 kilometers east of Tripoli, and were forced to retreat following clashes. Attempts by other pro-Bashaga armed groups to advance on the capital from the west and southwest were similarly repelled. Fighting in Tripoli and its outskirts subsided on 28 August, although the situation remained tense and fluid. A fragile calm has since prevailed in Tripoli. It is unclear how long it will last. Retaliatory attacks by both sides and the announced intention by the Government of National Unity to arrest pro-Bashaga elements involved in the fighting may trigger armed clashes that could again affect the civilian population. Mr. President, I'm very concerned at the limited political progress during the reporting period. The United Nations has consistently underscored that the conduct of elections remains the only way to break the current impasse. Despite our continued efforts, no progress has been made on forging a consensus on a constitutional framework for the elections. Following their meeting in Geneva in June, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Aguila Saleh, and the President of the High State Council, Khalid Mishri, held further discussions in Turkey on 1 August and in Egypt on 14 August. Regrettably, disagreements persisted, particularly on the eligibility criteria for presidential candidates. I urge both leaders to complete the work accomplished by the Joint Constitutional Committee. It's critical that an agreement is reached on a constitutional framework and timeline for elections that will enable the Libyan people to choose their leaders. Mr. President, there were a few positive developments during the reporting period. I commend, notably, the ongoing efforts of the 5+5 Joint Military Commission to preserve and strengthen the implementation of the ceasefire agreement. Of note, on 27 August, the Eastern delegation to the JMC called their counterparts in the West to reassure them that the Libyan National Army would not be involved in the fighting. Earlier, on 9 August, the Joint Military Commission met with UNSMIL in Sirte to enhance the readiness of the Libyan ceasefire monitoring mechanism. They made progress on the activation of a joint operations room in Sirte. They also finalized the modalities for the withdrawal of foreign forces, foreign fighters, and mercenaries from Libya. On another positive note, on 18 August, the General Assembly of the Supreme Court of Libya voted to restore the court's constitutional chamber, which had been suspended since 2016. The reactivation of the chamber could contribute to the resolution of disputes over the legitimacy of decisions taken by Libyan institutions. I'm also encouraged by the progress on national reconciliation, including the efforts of the Presidency Council to implement its strategic vision on national reconciliation. I reiterate the United Nations readiness to support Libyan efforts at national reconciliation, as well as the African Union's planned conference on national reconciliation in Libya, to be held at the earliest possible opportunity. Mr. President, turning to economic developments, oil production resumed on 17 July. By the end of July, production had reached pre-shutdown levels of 1.2 million barrels per day. Recently, the Libyan National Oil Corporation announced plans to further increase oil production capacity. I'm concerned, however, that growing public discontent in the southern region over lack of basic services and poor living conditions may lead to renewed closures of oil fields in the area. The explosion of a fuel tank in the vicinity of Zwia on 1 August, which killed 25 people and injured dozens of others, sparked a wave of protests over the long-standing marginalization of communities in the South. On 21 August, local dignitaries threatened to form a parallel government in the South if their demands for respect of their rights to basic services and stronger representation in state institutions were not met. Libya's national resources belong to all Libyans, and revenues from oil exports should be distributed equitably and fairly. Mr. President, I regret to report that human rights violations in Libya continue to be a major concern. On 20 August, armed groups affiliated with the Libyan National Army encircled the town of Qasr Buhadi, 25 kilometers south of Sirte. Civilians were deprived of their freedom of movement and prevented from leaving their districts, with hospitals, shops, schools, petrol stations, and other essential facilities forced to close. On 26 August, military actors withdrew from the town, but continued to control all movement in and out of the town. I urge relevant actors to immediately lift the continuing restrictions imposed on the population of Qasr Buhadi and warn that the situation could further escalate to an inter-community conflict. Individuals peacefully exercising their right to freedom of expression continued to be subjected to abduction, enforced disappearance, and arbitrary detention. Violence against women activists and their unlawful arrest and detention continue. Smear campaigns targeting civil society actors, particularly women, consisting of hate speech and incitements to violence, are deeply concerning and must cease. Migrants and refugees also continue to suffer serious human rights violations. According to the latest figures, 2,661 migrants and refugees are arbitrarily detained in official detention centers with restricted humanitarian access. The United Nations continues to call for the immediate release of all those who are arbitrarily detained and for due process for those charged with contravening Libyan laws. Mr. President, it's critical that all Libyan actors remain calm on the ground, refrain from escalatory rhetoric and actions, and take immediate steps to reverse the political polarization that is spilling over into violence. In light of the deterioration of the political and security climate in Tripoli, the United Nations must continue to provide and enhance good offices and mediation to help Libyan actors resolve the ongoing impasse and seek a consensual pathway to elections. Libyans themselves are responsible for determining their own future. Any support that parties receive from within or outside Libya should serve to unite them, not divide them. The Secretary General has put forward a number of proposals for the leadership of the mission and his good offices. I urge everyone to support the Secretary General's efforts to help Libyans forge a path to peace. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing. I now give the floor to Ambassador Cambodge.
Thank you, Mr. President. In accordance with paragraph 24E of Resolution 1970 of 26 February 2011, I have the honor to report to the Security Council on the work of the committee established by the same resolution. The report covers the period from 27 May to 30 August 2022, during which time the committee conducted its work using the silence procedure with the aim of facilitating the implementation of the sanctions measures. At the outset, since this is my first periodic report to the Security Council, let me say that I look forward to working with all the members of the committee for the remainder of our Security Council membership. Mr. President, on 13 July 2022, the Security Council adopted Resolution 2644, through which it extended the time-bound measures aimed at preventing illicit exports of petroleum from Libya, including crude oil and refined petroleum products, to 30 October 2023. The arms embargo, the travel ban, and the assets freeze were not time-bound and continue to apply. The Council also extended the mandate of the panel of experts on Libya to 15 November 2023. On 12 August, the Secretary General appointed 6 individuals to serve on the panel. Council members will recall that in the previous chair's briefing, my predecessor had informed the Council that the committee was considering the recommendations from the final report of the panel under its previous mandate. The committee had agreed to take action on the 3 recommendations addressed to it, as well as on a recommendation addressed to all member states. With respect to the implementation of the arms embargo, the committee received 2 attempted inspection reports and 2 vessel inspection reports from Operation UNAVFOR Med Irene. One of the inspections led to a seizure of cargo, and the committee expects a second report to be submitted with all relevant details following the submission of the initial report. Committee members expressed varying views on the seizure of the cargo. In connection with this particular inspection, the committee also received a member from the panel of experts concerning the cargo. In relation to the assets freeze, no negative decision was taken by the committee on exemption notification submitted by the Kingdom of Bahrain, invoking paragraph 19A of Resolution 1970 of 2011. In relation to notification submitted by the United Kingdom, also invoking paragraph 19A, the committee recalled its previous position on the matter, whereby the notification had been successfully cleared in the committee. No negative decision was taken by the committee with regard to another case brought by the United Kingdom, invoking paragraph 19A of Resolution 1970 of 2011. The committee further received 2 notifications from Bahrain, invoking paragraph 21 of Resolution 1970. The committee acknowledged receipt of one of those notifications, whereas a response is being considered for the second notification. The committee received a letter from Libya on matters related to the Libyan Investment Authority, a listed entity to which the committee responded. In accordance with 2 recommendations agreed by the committee from the panel's 5 reports, the chair intends to convene informal informals to discuss assets freeze-related matters. With regard to the travel ban measure, the committee extended for a 3rd time the 6-month exemption request granted for humanitarian purposes to 3 individuals on the committee's list, Ms. Safia Farkash Al-Barassi, Ms. Aisha Al-Qaddafi, and Mr. Muhammad Al-Qaddafi. The committee received a travel notification from Ms. Aisha Al-Qaddafi under the aforementioned exemption for travel to Italy. In accordance with the travel ban-related recommendation agreed by the committee from the panel's final report, the committee will be considering a letter to Italy regarding the travel, reminding of the destination country's notification requirement. Earlier, the committee had received a letter from Egypt confirming Ms. Safia Farkash Al-Barassi's travel from Egypt to Oman and back. An initial notification for this travel was submitted by the listed individual and reported by my predecessor to the Council. Regarding the sanctions list, the committee received a 7th communication from the delisting focal point established pursuant to Resolution 1730 of 2006 in connection with the delisting request of a listed individual. The focal point process is still ongoing. In accordance with the recommendation agreed by the committee from the panel's final report, the committee updated an existing entry on its sanctions list and issued a corresponding press release and note verbal to all member states. Lastly, Mr. President, the committee replied to a communication from Italy that touched on the privileges and immunities enjoyed by the experts. Mr. President, the primary responsibility to implement sanctions measures rests with member states. The committee is committed to facilitating the implementation of those measures and seeks to contribute to the promotion of peace and stability in Libya. Thank you.
I thank Ambassador Cambodge for her briefing. I now give the floor to the representative of Libya.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, Mr. President, I congratulate you on your able leadership of the Council this month. I also thank Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing. I welcome Madam Ambassador Ruchira Kambash, and I thank her for her briefing today. Mr. President, at the outset, we thank you for responding to our request to be the first speaker in this session, given the exceptional circumstances in Libya. Nevertheless, I will try to be brief, because honestly, we are tired of repeating the same statements. What is important to us today and to Libyan citizens is to listen to you, to listen to what is going to be said in this council and what you will do after the latest series of tragic events. As far as we are concerned, there is nothing positive to note since our latest briefing last month. The political stalemate, the security and military tensions persist. The suffering of the Libyan people has increased. What can I tell you about the events of last month? Children are dying of scorpion stings due to lack of medication. Libyan families are losing their lives when getting into the boats of death trying to emigrate to Europe. More mass graves have been uncovered in Terhuna. The energy crisis continues. Fuel is scarce, especially in the south. This led to a horrific humanitarian accident. A tanker has exploded, which claimed the lives of 22 people and injured 80. All that preceded the bloody events that took place in Tripoli 2 days ago. These events were not surprising. We warned that this might happen at many occasions during our meetings with you and during our statements. We warned of the repercussions of the political stalemate and political vacuum. Tripoli, ladies and gentlemen, is wounded, hurt, is in pain, is in mourning. The events in the heart of the capital and the outskirts claimed the lives of 32 people and injured 61 in less than 24 hours. Most of them are innocent civilians. These events were not the first of its kind, and they are not going to be the last. And they are closely connected to the increasing tension and political divisions. These events have claimed the lives of innocent civilians who have done nothing wrong and have nothing to do with the competition over influence and authority. They were killed suddenly while thinking that they were safe in their homes. This is why we asked to speak first, to convey to you the questions of Libyan citizens, to listen to you and to see what you will say to the families of the victims. What will you say to the family of the young man Mustafa Baraka, the family of Hanan al-Sugayer? What will you say to the family of Dr. Hussein al-Kikli? By the way, he is one of my relatives. He died before the eyes of his children and wife inside his home. They're listening to you now. Are you going to repeat your expressions of denunciation and condemnation? Or will the Council act to shoulder its responsibilities in order to maintain international peace and security and to protect civilians? I say that to point out this paradox that the Libyan people noted as well. They're wondering what is this contradictory stance of the Security Council concerning the concept of protecting civilians. If we compare what happened in 2011 with what's happening now and the latest events 2 days ago in Tripoli, we're not asking you once again to intervene. There are already so many actors that have intervened. And as we say, a believer shall not be stung from the same pit twice. All we ask you is to be serious in implementing your resolutions, and we ask you to avoid double standards. At this juncture, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, I ask you to stay a moment of silence to mourn the lives of the victims that lost their lives from 2011 till today. They have done nothing wrong. This is a moral responsibility that we should bear. I ask you to stand a moment of silence.
شكرا.
I thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the victims of today do not care about analyses or justifications, who's right and who's wrong, who's attacked and who's defended, who's legitimate and who's illegitimate. The victims know full well that those who are responsible for these events are those who wish to impose authority by force, who are clinging to authority without having a right to. Victims know that those who are responsible are those who bear arms outside the state control. The victims want accountability. There is no doubt that one day accountability will turn into reality because these crimes are imprescriptible. Will you contribute to investigate the events and hold the responsible accountable? Mr. President, today I will convey to you some of the questions that go through the minds of Libyans. They're wondering how the events unfolded this way. And this list of questions is not exhaustive, and I hope Security Council members can respond to these questions. First of all, why did elections fail? One of the main reasons is that elections were not held last December, and this failure is not attributed to domestic reasons alone. There are some countries that deliberately wanted to ensure the failure of these elections. This led to people feeling desperate and frustrated. It also opened the door for some to present some initiatives to fill the vacuum. Even if there were good intentions, some of these initiatives were contradictory or not consensual. So why was there not a real reaction by the international community or the Security Council towards those who ensured the failure of these elections? Although there are many resolutions already adopted that threaten those who are obstructing the political process, domestically or internationally, Libyan citizens are wondering. Second, the lack of consensus on the constitutional basis. The latest talks in Geneva have faltered, the talks between the House of Representatives and the High State Council. There has been no agreement on the constitutional basis, and the UNSMIL has stopped its operation because of the lack of, or the absence of, a UN envoy. This gave a wrong signal that there is no longer prospects for a political solution. And it opened the door for military mobilization and thinking about using force to impose a new fait accompli, a new reality. Also, it led to some confusion, as no national solutions and initiatives were supported. The Security Council is asking Libyans to ensure or to hold on to UN sponsorship of solutions, but the Security Council itself has been unable to agree on a UN envoy. On appointing a UN envoy, it is unfair to have Libyans bear this responsibility, because we know there is no agreement because of divisions among the Council. A few weeks ago, 2 names were put forward from Africa officially, but there has been no consensus. This is why we ask the Secretary General to act swiftly and to reach the minimum level of consensus. Consultations have been conducted in advance to ensure the success of this endeavor. And by the way, we take this opportunity to stress our support to the A3 and the African Union and their efforts to find a common solution to this problem, because Libya believes in the important role that we play in Africa. And we believe in what Africa can provide to us in our plight. This is why we stress once again that we support the United African position and the United African statements in the Council. Third, we ask about foreign interventions. Till when will these interventions continue? The direct ones and the indirect ones. The foreign presence on our territories. These countries play the role of a guardian and claim that they are the main point of reference on any issue related to the current crisis, whether an economic issue or a political issue. Of course, this is a new old topic, so Libyan citizens are wondering, what is your stance towards this issue? Imagine, with all the suffering in Libya, some countries still are trying to use the situation in Libya, try to control the Libyan assets, to hold the frozen assets, especially the assets of Libyan Investment Authority. This is in flagrant violation of Security Council resolutions, and we've sent you detailed notes on this issue. This is why we call upon the Security Council and the Sanctions Committee to bear the responsibility to implement their commitments and to ensure that the wealth of the Libyan people is not wasted. Fourth, the flow of weapons, the spread of weapons and the spread of militias outside of state control all over the country. The absence of the state's monopoly over weapons and arms, these are the main reasons that stand in the way of stability and state building. Nevertheless, your council is unable to stop these phenomena. So what is the solution? Libyan citizens are wondering. In conclusion, experience has shown that there is no military solution to the Libyan crisis. The era of coups has ended. The problem is political and not legal. Although the picture is bleak, maybe there is a final opportunity, maybe there is a glimmer of hope to break this stalemate, to restore legitimacy, to return legitimacy to the people. This is why we call upon the United Nations to act swiftly, to support all efforts to find a comprehensive political settlement, Libyan-owned and Libyan-led, not to find fragile solutions, as was the case in the past. We must find a consensual basis, an inclusive basis. We must call upon the House of Representatives and the state to agree on a constitutional basis and to set a time frame for general elections. And there comes the role of the international community and the United Nations. They must support a fair electoral process. They must ensure that results will be accepted. This would be a response to the demands of the Libyan people. Of course, we ask the international community to support the Presidency Council and the AU after they have agreed on ensuring the success of national reconciliation to end the spiral of this conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot expect different results when we're using the same tool. A sick person cannot recover if he's using the same medication again and again, while this medication has proven to be not appropriate. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Libya for the statement. I now give the floor to the members of the Security Council. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. I would like to thank USG DiCarlo for her briefing, and Raisadon Zenenga and his team in the United Nations Support Mission in Libya for their continued work in difficult circumstances. I also thank Ambassador Cambodge for her briefing on the 1970 committee, and I welcome the participation of the representative of Libya in our meeting today. President, I will make 3 points. First, the United Kingdom condemns the violence perpetrated by armed groups in Tripoli on 26 and 27 August. The use of violence by armed groups, whether to acquire control of territory or local resources, or to end political stalemate, is unacceptable. As we've just heard, the actions of armed groups this weekend resulted only in innocent civilian casualties and the destruction of civil infrastructure. Our condolences go to the victims and their families. Such violence is a result of the presence of parallel governments and the misappropriation of state resources. The Libyan parties and the international community must acknowledge that there is no military solution to Libya's crisis of legitimacy. Rather, all Libyan parties must engage constructively with a UN-brokered political process, supported by the wider international community, to agree a path towards free, fair and inclusive elections as soon as possible. We must also ensure that the resources of the Libyan people are managed in a transparent, responsible and accountable manner. The wishes of the Libyan people must be prioritised ahead of narrow self-interests. Second, I encourage all Council members to agree to the appointment of a special representative of the Secretary-General immediately. Increased tension and violence only illustrates the need for the urgent appointment of an SRSG to lead mediation efforts. I call upon this Council to stand ready to support the Special Representative to deliver an inclusive and comprehensive political process. Finally, President, in recent weeks, a number of diplomatic missions have faced restrictions on their movement within Libya. The Libyan authorities must allow full freedom of movement and travel within the territory in accordance with the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. We also emphasise the importance of allowing individuals and organisations delivering activity on behalf of embassies freedom to carry out their work. President, the United Kingdom reaffirms its readiness to work with Libyan stakeholders, the incoming SRSG, and all international partners to work towards a stable, peaceful, and prosperous Libya. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the UK for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Norway.
Thank you, President. I thank USG Di Carlo for her briefing, and I also thank the permanent representative of India for her presentation as chair of the 1970 committee. President, Norway is saddened by the loss of lives during the clashes in and around Tripoli last weekend. We share the deep concern expressed by the SG and USG Di Carlo about the developments in Libya. The country's political and military leaders must put the interest of the Libyan people first and put an end to the fighting. Norway joins UNSMIL in calling for an immediate cessation of hostilities in and around Tripoli. We urge all parties to exercise restraint and to contribute to de-escalation and to return to the negotiation table. We remind all parties of the need to protect the civilian population and civilian infrastructure. Reported shelling of hospitals and medical centers are of grave concern. Ambulance teams and medical staff must be given unhindered access. President, the latest round of fighting shows yet again that this conflict cannot be solved by military means. A political solution in Libya is the only way forward. The Libyan people have made it clear that they want elections, not violence and conflict. Libyan leaders must redouble their efforts to agree to a constitutional framework for elections and to find peaceful solutions. We welcome the meeting between the 5+5 JMC and UNSMIL in Sirte earlier this month, where ceasefire monitoring and withdrawal of foreign forces, foreign fighters and mercenaries from Libya was discussed. It is essential that the withdrawal moves forward with the necessary DDR measures. We also call for the strengthened efforts towards the unification of the armed forces. The end of the oil blockade is a positive development. The proceeds from Libya's oil production must benefit all Libyans and should not be held hostage to political rivalry. We call on all actors in Libya to respect the independence of economic and financial institutions such as the National Oil Corporation and the Central Bank of Libya. In closing, let me thank Stephanie Williams for her efforts as Special Advisor and again reiterate the importance of appointing a new SRSG for Libya. UNSMIL needs stable and predictable leadership in order to continue to fulfill its mission in Libya. The latest days has shown the urgency of doing so. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Norway for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank USG Di Carlo for her briefing. I thank the permanent representative of India for her report. I also welcome the Libyan delegation to this chamber, and we listened carefully to his intervention. Let me join others in expressing our deep concern with the troubling violence we have seen in the past days in Tripoli, which led to many civilian casualties. We call on all sides to de-escalate tensions and to protect civilians at all times. During our last meeting on today's topic, the Libyan delegation voiced several concerns about the way this Council has been treating the situation in Libya. As the Council acknowledges the importance of the Libyan-led and Libyan-owned dialogue for the present and future of Libya, we must listen to the Libyan parties' concern. Brazil notes the positive role of the United Nations Peacebuilding Commission can play in that regard, based on the consent of the state and in partnership with local authorities. The PBC is well suited to assist countries to identify and implement their own national peacebuilding priorities, many of which are relevant for sustaining peace and stability in Libya. Resolution 2647, adopted by this Council last month, for example, expressly underlines the importance of institution building, security sector reform, disarmament, demobilization and reintegration, and of the engagement of Libyan parties on these issues with relevant UN bodies in support of peace building. Mr. President, in spite of the political divisions in Libya, UNSMIL, albeit under precarious leadership arrangement, has kept its engagement with local authorities, including in the economic, security, and political sectors, with a view to unifying institutions from both sides. As we attempt to translate the Libyan-led and Libyan-owned mantra into reality, we must bear in mind that Libyan priorities should inform the Council's actions towards the country. The appointment of UNSMIL leadership is but one instance where the views from within Libya cannot be ignored, not least because the holder of the position must inspire the trust of all parties. Most importantly, UNSMIL must continue to foster common political ground between the two rival governments so that they can agree on a constitutional basis and the eligibility criteria that will allow for holding Libya's long-delayed elections. Mr. President, we have been hearing calls from within the Council for the continuation of oil production and export in Libya. Such calls happen against the backdrop of political disputes over the management of natural resources and the revenues, and of threats of supply disruption. In the absence of unified government policy regarding this matter, the parameter for the management of natural resources as a corollary of Libyan sovereignty should be domestic preservation in the interest of national development and well-being of all Libyans, rather than responding to foreign-driven interest pressures. The same is true for the Libyan assets frozen abroad. Brazil recalls the conclusions by the panel of experts assisting this Council in implementing the relevant Security Council resolutions. One conclusion is that the active management of Libyan frozen assets is not in line with paragraph 19 of Resolution 1970. The Council, however, has been unable to redress the situation. Finally, my delegation notes that the Council's authorization for member states to implement the arms embargo on Libya continues to give rise to controversy. We stress, once again, the importance of fully respecting the arms embargo and implementing it in accordance with the terms set out in the relevant Security Council resolutions. This Council has to find unity as it calls for the Libyan parties to put aside their differences and move forward in a genuine Libyan-led and Libyan-owned political process. And I thank you.
I thank the representative of Brazil for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, we're grateful to Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and the chairperson of the Sanctions Committee 1970, Madam Ruchir Kambodge, for their briefings. We're extremely concerned by the latest events in Libya. The prolonged conflict between the opposing parties became the result of the internal political stalemate and has led the country to another period of dual competing government authority and a catastrophic destabilization. Earlier, Libya was rocked by a wave of popular protests. The people demanded that the government achieve basic goals such as unifying government structures, ensuring security, and improving socioeconomic conditions. Now, the sad culmination of this process were the armed clashes in Tripoli this past weekend, including with the use of heavy weapons. This city has more than once become the arena where armed groups settle their differences. However, this tragedy is unprecedented by its scale over the past 2 years. As a result of fighting, dozens of people were killed, hundreds were wounded. Now this situation, although slightly has stabilized slightly, there could be another spiral of violence at any moment. We categorically reject any steps that could lead to a further escalation in the former Jamahiriya. We call on Libyan leaders to return to dialogue. We warn them not to use violence to achieve their goals. This is a road to nowhere and only contributes to further deepening the rift in Libya. Nor are the heated exchanges of accusatory rhetoric or attempts to punish opponents after the fact particularly helpful. We'd like to remind everyone that the origins of the current woeful situation in Libya are well known, although our partners prefer not to recall these reasons. The current chaos is the direct result of NATO's military intervention in 2011, when in the most blatant fashion the provisions of the relevant Security Council resolution were perverted. There was nothing left of Libya. The country experienced a de facto dismantling of its statehood. The system of government was destroyed. Interregional and intertribal relations were upended. 11 years later, we are still trying to overcome the pernicious consequences of that period. So today, declarations calling for peace of those responsible as a minimum, sound very dubious. We'd like to point out the cynical, passive attitude of the British informal sponsors, who didn't even try to convene a meeting of the Security Council in light of the bloody events in Tripoli, just as in the case of what's going on in Baghdad now. Judging by everything, our Western colleagues are much more worried about other topics, such as maintaining oil production, rather than the well-being and security of ordinary Libyans and Iraqis. Mr. President, we once again like to confirm that our approach to the Libyan peace process hasn't changed. The central role in agreeing on the parameters of the political process should belong to the Libyans themselves without imposing any ready-made recipes from outside. The way out of the current complex situation should be conducting duly prepared national elections on an inclusive basis. However, Libyan politicians still haven't come to a common denominator on the procedural aspects of these elections. Establishing artificial deadlines, experience has shown more than once, does not lead to desired results. We are convinced that in the current critical situation, all countries that have the means to influence the opposing parties must do everything possible to restore order in Libya. It's no secret that Libya is a place where the competing interests of a whole range of influential countries have clashed, which is an obstacle to stabilizing the country. Russia welcomes all negotiating formats if they truly represent a road to peace rather than pointless geopolitical projects with a hidden agenda. Without ensuring inclusiveness, it will hardly be possible to achieve a balanced outcome. This same principle is a precondition for success and the process of national reconciliation, which presupposes the involvement of all the leading political forces of the country, including the representatives of the former regime. And we welcome the efforts in that connection of the African Union in organizing a General Libyan Conference on National Reconciliation. We will try to offer whatever assistance we can in this process. On the issue of eliminating the foreign military presence, we have always been in favor of a simultaneous, balanced, gradual, and phased withdrawal of all non-Libyan armed groups without any exclusion in order not to undermine the balance of forces. Mr. President, we're convinced that an important role in contributing to the Libyan peace process should be played by the UN. And the key instrument of the UN is UNSMIL. Unfortunately, this mission continues to operate without a leader that has been given a mandate by the Security Council, which has a negative impact on its effectiveness. Against a backdrop of de facto dual government, competing government authorities, and heightened threat of fully fledged armed conflict, it is unacceptable that the United Nations presence remains without an intermediary with a requisite status and authority. We hope that the special representative of the Secretary General is appointed as quickly as possible. He will head UNSMIL. We have agreed to the candidate proposed by the Secretariat. This individual will without a doubt be able to steer the political process out of its current stalemate, unify and implement the existing initiatives and ideas. It's important that this individual have support of key Libyan players and regional actors, as well as have the support of a Security Council. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of India.
Mr. President, I thank USG Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing today. We welcome the presence of the Libyan ambassador at this meeting. The political stalemate in Libya and the subsequent mobilization of armed groups are a matter of concern. As we keep repeating, there is no military or armed solution to the issues facing the country. It is imperative, therefore, that all outstanding political issues are resolved peacefully by the parties concerned, keeping in mind the larger interests of the Libyan people. We hope that all parties will work together to maintain peace and stability in Libya. The immediate priority for Libya is to hold presidential and parliamentary elections at the earliest in a free, fair, inclusive and credible manner. In this regard, it is disappointing that consensus still eludes the parties on transitional measures governing the period leading to national elections. We hope that all outstanding issues will be resolved and that an early consensus will be achieved on a constitutional basis for holding the elections. We remain concerned at the resurgence of terrorist activity in Libya, and we reiterate that terrorist groups and affiliated entities must not be allowed to operate unchallenged in Libya. Terrorism emanating from Libya is bound to have cascading effects on the Sahel region, and it is therefore important for the international community to focus on it now and nip it in at this stage itself so as to avoid its collateral consequences on the wider African continent. Mr. President, the situation in Libya and the armed mobilizations once again call into attention the critical necessity of the full and complete withdrawal of foreign forces and mercenaries. We are yet to see signs of tangible progress on this front. Continued presence of foreign forces and mercenaries is detrimental to the peace and stability of the country and the region. There have been blatant violations of the arms embargo in Libya. In this regard, the UN panel of experts of the Libya Sanctions Committee in their recent report have categorically pointed out, and I quote, "The remainder of the training provided by Turkey to the Government of National Unity affiliated forces is military or naval in nature and thus a violation of paragraph 9 of UN Security Council Resolution 1970 of 2011, unquote. Moreover, in the same report, the UN panel of experts have also noted the continuous presence of Turkish-backed Syrian fighters in the Government of National Unity affiliated forces military camps in Tripoli. Such blatant disregard for Security Council resolutions on Libya is a cause for serious concern. Such activities are also in violation of the ceasefire agreement agreed to by the Libyan parties themselves in 2020, and we believe that we are seeing the adverse effects of such actions in the enduring political stalemate. We reiterate that the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Libya must be safeguarded. The political process needs to be fully Libyan-led and Libyan-owned with no imposition or external interference. India has traditionally enjoyed close and mutually beneficial bilateral ties with the Libyan people, and we remain committed to supporting Libya and the Libyan people in their endeavor to seek lasting peace and stability. Thank you.
I thank the representative of India for her statement, and I'll give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Undersecretary General DiCarlo, for your update on the current situation in Libya. Thank you also, Ambassador Kamboj, for your briefing. The United States welcomes your leadership of the 1970 Libyan Sanctions Committee. The violence that erupted in Tripoli Saturday and Sunday is the outcome of Libya's political leaders' abject failure to place the common good above their political interests and to work towards long-term peace and stability for the Libyan people. For months now, inflammatory rhetoric and sporadic incidents of violence among militias, foreign fighters, and foreign forces have punctuated a tense and unsustainable status quo. We have seen on two occasions, first in May and now again last weekend, incendiary remarks and unilateral action escalate into open violence, with the latest incident claiming civilian lives and destroying homes and buildings. The United States is deeply concerned by the continued belligerence of rival leaders, the continued maneuvering by militias for political and military advantage, and the continued flow of weapons and other military hardware into the country in contravention of the arms embargo. The Libyan people are losing hope that Libya's leaders can set aside personal ambition and achieve agreement on a constitutional framework for elections to allow Libyans their rightful opportunity to select their leaders peacefully. They are losing hope that their country can be free of corruption and foreign influence, that the armed forces can be unified, and that foreign fighters, forces, and mercenaries will be withdrawn. They are deprived of basic public services, while the powerful cut deals to divvy up hydrocarbon revenues in accordance with their own interests, particularly to militias controlled by various factions, robbing the Libyan people of their national wealth. At the same time, economic opportunities for Libyans have decreased because of uncertainty about the future of Libya. This ongoing instability is a reminder of the urgent need for the immediate appointment of a new UN Special Representative of the Secretary General for Libya to resume mediation efforts, with unified support from the international community, including the members of this council. UN leadership on the Libya file remains essential to reestablishing stability and achieving forward progress on the political process. The United States will continue to fully support UN efforts to secure a constitutional framework for elections and a concrete timeline to Election Day. We reiterate that persons who obstruct or undermine the political process and those providing support for armed groups or criminal networks through the illicit exploitation of crude oil or any other natural resources in Libya may be subject to UN sanctions. Under former Special Advisor Williams' leadership, the delegations from the House of Representatives and High State Council made important progress on election issues. We urge House of Representatives Speaker Aguila Saleh and the President of the High State Council, Khalid al-Mishri, to continue their efforts by engaging constructively with UNSMIL and the Special Representative once appointed to finalize the eligibility requirements for the candidates running in the presidential elections and commit to an election calendar. Libya is on a precipice. We call on all parties in Libya to refrain from violence or from actions that will precipitate violence. We call on those who risk once again being dragged into violence to put down their arms. We call on those outside Libya who have encouraged violence through political, financial, and military support to cease their interference and respect the arms embargo. We call on all parties to turn away from the path to war and to work together towards peace and stability. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Albania.
Thank you, Mr. President, and let me thank the USG DiCarlo for information on the recent developments in Libya and Ambassador Camboy for introducing a report on the work of the 1970 Sanctions Committee. Colleagues, we are outraged by the explosion of violence of the last days and the brazen use of heavy weaponry in highly populated neighborhoods in the Libyan capital. We deplore the loss of life by the recent wave of senseless violence and wish a speedy recovery to those wounded. The protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure is an obligation to be respected by all parties in all circumstances, and that must be repeated endlessly. Mr. President, the fighting of last days has been a long time coming. The protracted political impasse intensifies a legitimacy void, which in turn exacerbates an increasingly volatile security situation in the country. Sadly, what we are facing today is the worst display of institutional rivalry through militias. The divisions and stalemate in Libya generate a false impression that the long-standing Libyan crisis could be resolved through imposition instead of dialogue, compromise, and political process. This tragic event in Tripoli clearly demonstrates that the country's future is closely intertwined with the success of the political process and the holding of national elections. The decision on who should run the country and how its wealth is distributed cannot be and will not be decided by guns, but by ballots, not by strongmen, but by the free will of people. We firmly condemn all and any actions that inject instability and insecurity and violence. We condemn the use of force for political purposes and for achieving political gains. Mr. President, while foreign interferences must cease in Libya, we urge all parties to take advantage of the United Nations support to ensure the full implementation of the ceasefire agreement and to the restart of the political process. In full respect of Libyan sovereignty, Albania reaffirms its support to the UN mediation to facilitate the necessary and urgent intra-Libyan dialogue to overcome the current impasse. Libyan stakeholders must put the well-being of the Libyan people first and over their own narrow interests. This includes respect for human rights for all Libyans. We reiterate our firm belief that elections in Libya are the only way to do justice to Libyan people's sufferings, to act upon their demand for democracy, and to respect their rights to the national wealth and resources. Only an elected and legitimate government will be able to deal with and meet the urgent needs of the Libyan people, and this makes the electoral process a matter of absolute priority. Mr. President, we commend the Secretary General's tireless efforts to find a suitable candidate for the position of the SRG in Libya and move towards balanced, inclusive, and sustainable solutions to the Libyan situation. We reiterate our support for a Libyan-owned and Libyan-led process with UN facilitation and mediation. The recent events demonstrate that every day without a solution is a lost day for Libya. It is up to the Libyans and their political class to make sure that every day matters. And I thank you.
I thank the representative of Albania for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Kenya.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3, namely Gabon, Ghana, and Kenya. We thank Undersecretary General Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo and Ambassador Ruchira Kamboj, Chair of the 1970 Committee, for their briefings. We welcome the participation of Ambassador Tahir El Soni, Permanent Representative of Libya. Mr. President, we are extremely concerned about the outbreak of clashes in Tripoli during the last few days. We offer our deepest condolences to the bereaved families and call for an immediate cessation of the violence. We call for Libya's leaders to heed their people's desire for peace and security. That can only be achieved by wholly embracing that the destiny of the Libyan people is to be united, and therefore accepting that no one side of the political divide, whether in Tripoli or Benghazi, will ever have the monopoly of force or political domination. These clashes may appear to offer temporary advantage, but that is a dangerous illusion. Instead, all they offer is an opportunity for those who would benefit from a reversal of the path to reconciliation. As such, we call for an end to all inflammatory remarks by political leaders and the corresponding heightened movement and mobilization of armed groups. We recommend to all parties the mediating role of UNSMIL and other international support in this regard. We also invite Libya to utilize the offer by the African Union in line with Resolution 2647. This is also in line with the African Union's Peace and Security Council's commitment expressed in its communique number 1091 of the 29th of June. We look forward to the prompt nomination of an African Special Representative of the Secretary General. It is time that sustained mediation was offered and accepted by all sides to enable Libya to end the transitional phase and elect an inclusive government. The elections require a firm constitutional basis, adopted through inclusive dialogue and consensus if they are to be credible. We call upon all relevant Libyan parties to make every effort to deliver that kind of constitutional framework. Mr. President, we are sorely aware that as we urge Libyans to exert themselves in resolving their differences, they must contend with external interests that undermine their push for unity. We call on the political leadership and the people of Libya to make the courageous choice to resist these external influences. Libya has suffered enough. Africa has suffered enough. It is time we collectively resisted being divided for powerful foreign interests that only care for their own advantage and maneuvers against each other. We demand the immediate withdrawal of all foreign forces, foreign fighters, and mercenaries from the territory of Libya. Their continued presence undermines the territorial integrity of Libya and the peace and security of the Libyan people. We laud the 5+5 Joint Military Commission for their work in helping sustain the ceasefire agreement. We urge that they press on in the implementation of the agreement and the reunification of the armed forces. We urge for close collaboration between Libya, the UN, neighboring countries, and the African Union in monitoring their withdrawal to avoid the transfer of armed conflict into the region. Corresponding disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration to the various countries of origin should be conducted. Mr. President, in preserving Libya's frozen assets for future generations of Libya and cognizant of competing external interests in Libya's resources and wealth, we urge that any action on these assets be undertaken in consultation with the Libyan authorities. We also call for the protection of Libya's oil sector from its politicization and manipulation by external influences. Mr. President, we continue to be disturbed that the inhumane treatment of migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers continues unabated both on land and at sea. We demand that those involved, whether directly or indirectly, desist from such abuse of human rights. We seek a closer monitoring by the UN of the resources and information channels that enable it, and would be expecting the Secretary General's report on migrant smuggling to shed more light on this issue. We also call for consideration of more practical ways of addressing its root causes. Finally, Mr. President, we reaffirm our respect for Libya's territorial integrity and sovereignty and our support for a truly Libyan-led and owned peace process. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Kenya for his statement. Now I give the floor to the representative of United Arab Emirates.
السيد الرئيس.
Mr. President, at the outset, I thank Mr. Carlo and Ambassador Kambosh for their thorough briefings. We also welcome Ambassador Taher Al-Sunni's participation in today's session and thank him for his important briefing about the situation in Libya. We express our deepest condolences and sympathy to the ambassador and to the Libyan people, including the families of the civilian victims of recent Tripoli clashes, as well as the fuel tanker accident that took place in Bint Bayam municipality earlier this month. Unfortunately, such incidents represent yet another aspect of the daily suffering of the Libyan people. In a security situation that has become increasingly dangerous due to continued armed clashes, particularly in the capital, Libyans continue to face numerous other difficulties and crises, most importantly, issues related to the supply of energy, water, and electricity, as well as high commodity prices. The UAE condemned the recent armed violence in Libya and called on all parties to immediately stop all military operations. We also stressed the importance of the urgent departure of all armed groups and militias from civilian areas in the city of Tripoli. Furthermore, we emphasized the importance of ensuring the safety and security of unarmed civilians, especially women and children, as well as civilian infrastructure and medical facilities. They must not be exposed to further danger. We call on the concerned actors and all parties in Libya to end their clashes. We also remind them of their obligations under international humanitarian law and call on them to exercise utmost restraint and to listen to the voice of reason to find a way out of the crisis. The UAE urges all parties to abandon discord, restore calm, engage in a meaningful dialogue, and prioritize national interests and restore security and stability in Libya. A return to fighting and escalation is not a solution. It will only bring devastation to all Libyans. Mr. President, in light of the recent developments, we would like to focus our statement on the following four critical areas. First, the UAE calls on all Libyan parties to take concrete steps to unify the military institutions and address lawlessness and fighting among armed groups in Tripoli and its suburbs. In this regard, we support the statement made by UNSMIL regarding the immediate need to cease hostilities and reiterate the UAE's firm position on the importance of the simultaneous, phased, gradual, and balanced withdrawal of all foreign forces and fighters and mercenaries from Libya. We also call for maintaining the gains achieved as a result of the comprehensive ceasefire agreement, the outcomes of the roadmap, and the relevant Security Council resolutions. Second, the time has come for the Libyan parties to make the necessary concessions to reach an agreement on the remaining contentious points in the draft constitution, and to then hold parliamentary and presidential elections. These are necessary steps to end the stalemate in the political process. Considering recent developments, the reasons that obstruct the electoral process have become clear and apparent to all. The electoral process has been derailed by polarization, alliances, and shifting interests that do not serve the aspirations of the Libyan people and the hopes of the 3 million Libyan men, women, and youth who register to participate in the elections. We also stress the importance of the National Reconciliation Project, which is led by the Presidential Council and based on the principles of Libyan sovereignty and inclusiveness. The project plays a critical role in supporting efforts aimed at advancing the political process and sustaining lasting peace across all Libyan regions. Third, in accordance with Security Council resolutions and the concerns of Libyans, the rights of the Libyan people and the protection of their resources and frozen assets should remain a top priority. We welcome here all steps taken to unify and depoliticize Libyan financial and critical institutions, including the energy and oil sectors. While prioritizing security and political situations in Libya, the economic situation should not be neglected, as it plays an important role in supporting stability in Libya. Fourth, we look forward to the appointment of the Secretary General's Special Representative to Libya so that he can lead UNSMIL from Tripoli and enjoy sufficient consensus to support Libyans in their efforts to defuse tensions and to advance the political process as well as the security and economic tracks. In conclusion, we reiterate that the Libyan people deserve to live in peace. We hope that all Libyan parties will take into consideration the necessary measures to achieve the aspirations of their people and pave the way towards peace, security, and development in Libya. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of UAE. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. I would also like to thank the Under-Secretary General and the Chair of the Sanctions Committee for their briefings, and I welcome the present representation of the Permanent Representative of Libya. France has also followed with concern the resurgence of tensions in Libya. The violence which has broken out over the recent days in Tripoli shows that the status quo is not sustainable, and we call upon all protagonists to abstain from any recourse to violence and to fully comply with the ceasefire agreement of the 23rd of October 2020. We also encourage all Libyan stakeholders to engage in constructive dialogue to smooth tensions and preserve the unity and stability of the country. France reiterates the urgency of reaching a viable political solution, which means forming a unified, inclusive government, which can exert its authority throughout the territory, can organise and ensure the security for presidential and parliamentary elections as soon as possible. France thus calls upon Libyan stakeholders to finalise without further ado the constitutional basis necessary for these elections. On the security front, it's crucial to preserve the achievements of the ceasefire agreement. First of all, freedom of movement throughout Libyan territory, but also the dialogue between the main security stakeholders. This is essential to launch a demobilisation, disarmament and reintegration process, and to make progress in implementing the plan for the withdrawal of foreign forces and mercenaries. The arms embargo must also be fully respected, and France is prepared to contribute to all of these measures, as well as to the work towards the reunification of the Libyan armed forces. On the economic front, resumed oil production is a positive step forward which must be sustained. France reiterates its call for the implementation of an equitable and transparent redistribution mechanism for oil revenues to the benefit of the whole population. France remains concerned regarding the violations of the rights of migrants and refugees and will continue to work on combating impunity. We recall the primary responsibility incumbent upon the Libyan authorities. We will work with all members of the Council to renew next September the authorisation allowing for inspections of vessels suspected of trafficking migrants off the Libyan coast. Finally, President, it's more important than ever for this Council and the United Nations to step up and meet the challenges, which is why we call for the swift appointment of a special representative of the Secretary-General and call upon all stakeholders to show flexibility so as to facilitate an appointment which has already been waited for too long. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Mexico.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. At the outset, I would like to thank the Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo and Ambassador Rashida Kambodge for their briefings. Mexico expresses its deep concern regarding the armed clashes which took place last weekend in Tripoli. We particularly deplore the deaths of civilians and the damage caused to hospitals and other civilian infrastructure. We call for the Security Council to condemn this violence, to call for respect for the ceasefire agreements and international humanitarian law. This new fruitless attempt to move out of the political stalemate through force shows a high cost paid by civilians for the stalling in negotiations on a legal basis in order to organise free and inclusive elections. It is inadmissible that lives and the heritage of over 6 million Libyans are threatened constantly through the opportunism of militias and the irresponsibility of some political actors. More still, there is indifference or even complicity from the international community. We reiterate our concern regarding the situation faced by migrants in Libya. In this alarming context, Mexico wishes to underscore 2 points. Firstly, the historic experience of my country in the face of conflicts in Latin America has shown us that regional mobilization is crucial to resolve situations such as the one in Libya. We believe that regional bodies, and particularly the African Union and the League of Arab States, must bolster their work to move forward in the political process in this country in line with Chapter 8 of the United Nations Charter and the parameters of the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum. Regional action is particularly necessary given the inability of this Council to reach an agreement on the leadership and mandate of UNSMIL. Secondly, my country reiterates the need to continue monitoring and preventing illicit trade in weapons through strict application of the embargoes imposed by this Council. We urge all states to cooperate to avoid arms, ammunition and explosives continuing to worsen the violence in Libya. The humanitarian consequences of irresponsible flows of weapons have been made clear during this conflict, and their destructive potential has been recalled once again last weekend. In parallel, mercenaries and foreign fighters, as well as the Libyan security forces and their reunification, are crucial in order to move towards stabilizing the country. Finally, we deem it urgent that there be the appointment of a special representative who can continue the work to bring parties closer together and lead UNSMIL's work. We call for Member States to assume a constructive and flexible stance so that the mission can contribute to the pacification and stabilization of Libya and the whole region. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Mexico for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. President, and my thanks also to our briefers this afternoon, USG Di Carlo and Ambassador Cambodge as chair of the 1970 committee. And let me also welcome the participation of the Libyan ambassador at this meeting. Mr. President, the violent confrontations that we have seen in Libya, in Tripoli in recent days, are deeply concerning and only serve to raise tensions while exacting the greatest toll on the civilian population, and we sympathise with those who have lost loved ones and who have been injured over the last couple of days. We unequivocally reject all attempts to gain legitimacy or control over state institutions through the threat of the use of force. To Libya's leaders, we say legitimacy comes only from the Libyan people. Legitimacy comes only from the ballot box. The current executive impasse can only be addressed through the holding of free, fair and inclusive elections. The fact that 3 million Libyans registered to vote in December should have provided incentive enough to find agreement on a way forward, capitalising on progress made in Cairo and Geneva. Today, Libyans are increasingly facing deteriorating living conditions, with access to basic services, including water, food and healthcare, seriously curtailed. They neither want nor can cope with another conflict. Responsible and transparent governance is urgently needed. An independent and unified judiciary is also key. We hope that the recent decision to reactivate the Constitutional Chamber will contribute to safeguarding Libyans' rights and freedoms, paving a way towards elections as soon as possible. Mr. President, we remain gravely concerned about the human rights situation in Libya, including recent reports of arbitrary detention and enforced disappearances around the July demonstrations. Libya's democratic future is jeopardised by deepening restrictions on civil society, which regrettably include increased incidents of online hate speech and incitement to violence targeting women activists. We condemn these deplorable acts. Women's full, equal, meaningful and safe participation in public life, including a future electoral process, must be guaranteed. And we would echo the statements made by Stephanie Williams in calling for youth voices to be lifted in this regard also. Mr. President, restrictions on the activities of international organisations working with migrants are particularly worrying in light of ongoing denials of access for UN agencies and humanitarian partners to detention centres. Recent reports from the Secretary-General and from the Libya fact-finding mission lay bare abhorrent violations of human rights and humanitarian and protection concerns faced by migrants and refugees in Libya. We call on the authorities to grant full humanitarian access to all of those in need of assistance without delay. We also call on this Council to unanimously renew Resolution 2240 on migrant smuggling and human trafficking next month. Mr. President, it is nearly 2 years since the ceasefire agreement delivered a fragile stability to war-weary Libyans. It is now past time to fully implement this agreement. We welcome the progress made during a meeting earlier this month between the Joint Military Commission and UNSMIL in Sirte and the activation of a joint operations room. We hope to see prompt follow-up on this progress made, including with regard to the action plan for the withdrawal of foreign forces, foreign fighters and mercenaries. Finally, in April, this Council tasked UNSMIL with implementing important reforms recommended by the Strategic Review. A special representative is needed on the ground to carry out this vital task and to navigate the mission through this delicate phase of Libya's transition. We express our gratitude to Acting Head of Mission, Mr. Denenga, for his ongoing efforts, and we also take this opportunity to once again acknowledge the sterling work of Stephanie Williams in her role as Special Advisor. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ireland for her statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of China. I thank USG DiCarlo and the chairperson of the Libya Sanctions Committee, Ambassador Cambodge of India, for their briefings. I welcome the permanent representative of Libya, Ambassador El Soni, to this meeting. I wish to make the following 4 points. First, the Libyan crisis has entered into its 11th year. The current peaceful situation was indeed hard-earned and therefore should be doubly treasured by the Libyan parties. The recent clashes in Tripoli have resulted in over 200 casualties. China is deeply concerned about this. We call upon the Libyan parties to put their national and the people's interests first, exert maximum restraint, resolve their differences through peaceful means of dialogue and negotiations, and do their utmost to avoid all violence. China supports 5+5 Joint Military Commission in continuing to play a critical role in maintaining ceasefire and facilitating the departure of foreign forces and mercenaries. We hope that on the condition of ensuring a force balance, the withdrawal of foreign troops and mercenaries from Libya can make progress. Second, political means are the only viable means for resolving the Libyan crisis. China welcomes the fact that the parties in Libya have reached an agreement on most of the items in the constitutional basis for elections and hopes that the parties will maintain the momentum for dialogue and negotiation present in the previous period, strive for the middle ground, and reach an agreement on the constitutional basis without delay, with a view to creating favorable conditions for the early holding of the elections, that the Libyan parties be engaged in promoting reconciliation and rebuilding mutual trust is conducive to creating favorable conditions for the Libyan process. China welcomes that the Libyan parties held a preparatory meeting on reconciliation in the Republic of the Congo under the auspices of the African Union, and has reached a consensus for the next stage of work, and is confident that Libya can be informed by and benefit from Africa's rich experience in reconciliation. External interference is a major root cause, leaving the Libyan question without a solution for all these years. The international community should abide by the principle of Libya-led and Libya-owned, fully listen to and take on board the concerns of the Libyan parties, provide constructive assistance to the country, and avoid imposing a solution from the outside. Third, the United Nations is the main avenue for carrying out good offices for Libya, and UNSMIL should provide an active role in promoting dialogue and negotiation among the Libyan parties. An early appointment of SRSG will help increase UN's ability for good offices and restore the full functionality of UNSMIL. The fact that the position of SRSG has remained long vacant is fully telling of the complexities and the sensitivities surrounding the Libyan issue. China encouraged the Secretariat to increase its communication and consultation and increase mutual trust with the parties concerned, including those directly involved, and hopes that the appointment of SRSG can make headway as soon as possible. Fourth, restoring and developing the economy and improving the livelihood are the main instruments for consolidating peace and stability in the country. Oil is an important source of income for the Libyan economy, and China welcomes the full resumption of the Libyan oil production and urges the parties to increase consultation on the distribution of the oil income so as to ensure that the resource dividend can benefit the whole population. Libya has long-standing concerns on the losses sustained by its frozen assets and has raised specific claims. The Council and the Sanctions Committee should actively study and respond to this matter. And I'll resume my function as the President of the Council.
There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.